Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a God who, at the first hint of rebellion, simply snaps his fingers and evil vanishes. No Satan, no demons, no temptation, no suffering. It sounds ideal, doesn't it? But then ask yourself, what kind of love can exist in a world where fear silences freedom? What kind of goodness can shine where darkness is never allowed to challenge it? Before we demand that God destroy the devil, we must dare to ask what if his refusal to do so is not a failure of power, but a perfection of purpose. The idea that God gave free will to his creations is one of the most profound truths at the heart of both theology and philosophy. It is not just a trait or feature of our existence, it is the very foundation upon which love, morality, and meaning rest. Free will is what makes a relationship with God possible. Without it, we would be mere puppets, mechanically fulfilling commands, without spirit or soul. The angels, like humans, were created with this gift of choice. It was not given lightly, for it held within it the possibility of rebellion, disobedience, and yes, even the emergence of evil itself. But it was also the only way love could be real. A coerced love is no love at all. To choose God, to worship Him freely, is of infinite more value than obedience born of force. That is why God created beings capable of choice. Now, when Satan, once an angel of light, chose rebellion, he did so not because God designed him to fall, but because the gift he was given allowed for it. His fall was the misuse of a holy gift. This is a difficult idea, for we often think that if God foresaw this fall, He should have prevented it. But that would mean creating a world without real freedom. And a world without freedom is one in which no creature can truly love, repent, grow, or choose the good. It would be a static world, a frozen machine, predictable and hollow. God wanted more than robots. He wanted children, companions, worshippers, who could say yes or no and mean it. If God were to destroy Satan for exercising this freedom, even wickedly, it would send a message that freedom is tolerated only as long as it pleases the Creator. It would turn the gift into a leash. It would imply that you may choose, but only within a narrow band of options. Step outside, and you will be erased. That is not genuine freedom. That is a trap. And God, being perfect, does not give with one hand and take away with the other. The risk of freedom was known to God, yet He gave it anyway, for He knew it was better to create beings who could choose evil than to create beings who could not choose at all. There is also an eternal quality to this kind of gift. Free will is not just an ability that comes and goes, it is part of the very being of rational creatures. To destroy Satan for using free will wrongly would mean destroying the entire framework in which choice exists. And that would unmake the moral structure of the universe itself. It would not be justice. It would be cosmic panic, an act of fear, not love. God does not act in fear. He allows the consequences of free choices to unfold. Satan remains not because God is indifferent, but because God is faithful to His own moral logic. This is not to say that evil will go unpunished. Judgment comes. Justice is real. But it is not immediate erasure. It is not the deletion of a soul like a faulty line of code. That would be to deny that the soul ever had meaning to begin with. Instead, God permits time, consequence, and even suffering, not because He is weak, but because He is so supremely strong that He does not fear what wickedness does. He knows it will be defeated, not by force alone, but by truth, by love, by light that outlasts the darkness. If God were to eliminate all wrongdoers the moment they chose evil, then none of us would stand, for we too have misused our freedom. We too have fallen short, and if we plead for mercy for ourselves, we must at least accept the divine consistency that does not allow even Satan to be destroyed merely for being wrong. This is not softness. This is holiness, the kind that respects even the freedom of its enemies. In the end, free will is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. It is the path to all good things: faith, love, courage, redemption. And God in his wisdom honors the path he himself made, even when it leads through shadow. That is why he does not kill Satan, because the gift he gave is too sacred to revoke, not even from those who twist it against him. When we speak of angels, including Satan and the fallen ones, we must remember that they are not beings like us in flesh and bone. They are spiritual creatures, pure intelligences without physical bodies, made by God to exist eternally. Their nature is not bound by time, decay, or mortality as ours is. They do not grow old, fall sick, or die the way humans do. From the moment of their creation, they were made to exist forever. This is a truth that cannot be altered without unraveling the very fabric of what they are. If we imagine that God could simply kill Satan as if he were a man to be struck down, we are thinking in human terms, not divine ones. Death, as we know it, is a transition, a severing of body from soul, the end of earthly life. But Satan has no body to die with. There is no organ to fail, no heart to stop. He is not a creature of flesh but of spirit, and spirit cannot be destroyed in the same way matter can. To kill such a being would require something more than an act of force. It would require unmaking what was once created to last forever. And unmaking is a far more profound and terrible thing than punishment. It would be not just the end of a life, but the undoing of God's own decision to bring that being into existence. It would be a kind of reversal of creation, a self-contradiction in the divine mind. For God, who said, "Let it be," would then have to say, "Let it never have been." This is not how the Creator works. His acts are not rash, and his purposes are not experimental. He does not create lightly, and therefore he does not destroy in panic or rage. Once an eternal being is made, it carries that eternity with it. Its existence becomes a fixed reality in the moral structure of the universe. Even if we say that God is all-powerful and could do anything, we must be careful. Omnipotence does not mean absurdity. It does not mean that God can do what is logically or morally incoherent. God cannot make a square circle, not because he is weak, but because nonsense is not a thing to be done. Likewise, he cannot uncreate what he has created to be eternal without betraying his own nature. The fallen angels, including Satan, were given permanence in their being. Their fall did not strip them of their immortality. It corrupted their will, but not their nature. They are still what they were made to be in structure, though not in moral alignment. Furthermore, if God were to annihilate Satan, it would raise the question of whether any created being is truly secure in its existence. If even an angel made for eternity can be erased because of its rebellion, then who is safe? Can God's love truly be trusted if his creation is only as secure as its behavior? This would shift the whole foundation of divine relationship from love to fear. It would suggest that eternal beings are not actually eternal, but conditionally eternal, dependent on flawless obedience. That is not what the scriptures or reason teaches us. Eternal beings are just that, eternal. Their rebellion may earn judgment, punishment, or even exile, but not erasure. It is also worth recognizing that the eternal nature of these beings allows for the full unfolding of justice. Unlike human lifespans, which are short and fragile, the story of the angelic rebellion and its consequences can play out across the vast sweep of cosmic time. God does not rush judgment. He lets evil expose itself, lets its consequences be felt, and lets the whole moral weight of rebellion settle into place. This is not neglect. It is patience that respects the dignity of the created order. The very structure of reality includes beings who cannot die because they were not made to. To ask God to kill Satan is to ask him to violate the nature he gave to spirits to act against his own design. That is something he does not do. He is not a careless artist who scrapes the canvas when one brushstroke goes wrong. He is a sovereign creator who weaves even rebellion into the larger tapestry of redemption and justice. Satan remains not because God is unable to act, but because the kind of being Satan is cannot be ended without destroying something deeper than evil, the constancy of divine creation. Justice, as understood in the divine sense, is not a swift execution of punishment, nor is it the mere removal of the wrongdoer. It is a process, a principle, and a purpose woven into the very nature of reality. When we demand that God should simply destroy Satan or the fallen angels, we are asking not for justice but for elimination. We are assuming that the presence of evil must be met with immediate obliteration in order for righteousness to prevail. But that is not how true justice operates, not in human law, and certainly not in divine order. To destroy a being is not necessarily to bring justice to that being. Justice involves accountability, recognition of wrongdoing, exposure of motive, and the unfolding of consequences. It is not about silence, but about revelation. If God were to erase Satan with a single command, evil would disappear from view, but its meaning would remain unexplored. The rebellion would be silenced, but not answered. No one would see the full depth of its error, the cost of its pride, the destruction it causes. God allows Satan to remain not because he is indifferent to evil, but because evil must be fully revealed before it can be fully judged. Justice is not satisfied with shortcuts. In our world, we understand that even the worst crimes go through trial. Evidence is examined. Witnesses are heard. Judgments are given only after understanding. If a judge were to sentence a man to death without trial, we would call that injustice, even if the man were truly guilty. Why then do we expect the Creator of justice itself to act without process? The devil has chosen rebellion, but that rebellion must be seen in all its horror, played out in history, exposed through time. Only then can justice be complete and punishment meaningful. Moreover, there is a profound distinction between punishment and annihilation. Punishment assumes the continued existence of the one punished. It assumes that the being remains conscious of justice, aware of the weight of its choices. Annihilation, on the other hand, removes the subject entirely. There is no awareness, no reckoning, no moral closure. It is a wiping away, not a setting right. If Satan were simply destroyed, what justice would be done? To whom would it speak? What warning would it give? The universe would see no consequences, only an absence. But the divine justice is not about absence. It is about presence, the presence of truth, the presence of moral consequence, the presence of divine holiness responding to evil in perfect timing. It is also vital to recognize that justice in God's economy is not only about punishing evil, it is about exalting good. It is not merely about stamping out darkness, but about illuminating the contrast between the darkness and the light. If evil is immediately removed, how does goodness shine? How does virtue triumph? How does courage, faith, and love manifest in the face of danger, temptation, and lies? Justice allows the battlefield to exist so that the victor may be seen for what he is. The endurance of good amidst evil is itself a kind of testimony, a form of cosmic justice that declares, not just that evil loses, but that good wins in spite of it. This is why evil is permitted to remain for a time, not because God is uncertain or passive, but because he is just. Justice is not reactionary. It is deliberate, measured, and whole. And it never arrives too early or too late. If God were to simply kill Satan, it would suggest that justice is a matter of force, not wisdom. It would suggest that God deals with rebellion by sweeping it under the rug, rather than answering it openly and perfectly. What we see in the world today, the conflict between right and wrong, the suffering, the spiritual warfare is not the result of God's weakness, but the unfolding of God's justice. Evil is being allowed to reach its full shape so that its defeat will be total and final. Every lie will be answered. Every wound will be healed. Every prideful word will be answered by truth. This is not destruction for its own sake. It is justice in its most complete form. And that takes time, not because God needs time, but because we do. The universe itself needs to witness the righteousness of God, not just feel its weight. And so the process continues, not in silence, but in purpose. Coercion is not love, and love cannot exist where coercion reigns. This is a truth that lies at the heart of every real relationship, and it is most true in the relationship between creator and creature. If God were to eliminate Satan and all fallen angels by sheer force the moment they rebelled, it would indeed show his power. But it would also raise a haunting question: do his creatures obey him out of love or out of fear? And if fear is the reason for obedience, what kind of kingdom is he building? Love, if it is to be authentic, must be freely chosen. It must arise from the will, not from compulsion. That is why the gift of free will is so essential. God created beings who could choose him or reject him, not because he wanted rebellion, but because he wanted real love. The kind of devotion that means something. Not the kind that can be programmed, but the kind that is born out of liberty. To maintain that kind of love in the universe, God must also accept the risk that some will not love him. Some will oppose him. Some will twist freedom into rebellion. But that risk is the cost of love, and it is a cost he willingly bears. Now, if God were to respond to rebellion by destroying the rebel, he would introduce a fear-based obedience into the structure of existence. He would essentially say, "You are free to choose, but only once. Choose wrongly and you will cease to exist." That kind of freedom is not freedom at all. It is a trap, a kind of cosmic blackmail. True freedom includes the possibility of continued existence, even in rejection. That does not mean there are no consequences. There are. Justice, judgment, separation from God, these are real and weighty. But they are not the same as being forcibly removed from existence, simply for using the gift of freedom in a way the giver did not prefer. The moment freedom is met with annihilation, the entire moral landscape changes. No longer is good chosen because it is good. It is chosen because it is safe. And safety, while important, is not the same as righteousness. A world where people serve God out of fear of being erased is a world of hollow worship, where the words "I love you" are soaked in survival instinct rather than affection. God does not desire that. His kingdom is not built on trembling servitude but on joyful surrender. This is why Satan still exists. His continued existence is not a flaw in divine justice, it is a reflection of divine integrity. God does not use force to win hearts. He does not threaten into submission. Instead, he invites. He shows, teaches, warns, and woos. He lets the consequences of evil become visible so that good may be chosen not as a reaction to terror, but as a decision born of understanding. And for that decision to be real, the alternative must remain. The presence of Satan serves as a living, terrible symbol of what happens when freedom is turned against its maker. It is a warning, but not a forced lesson. It is part of the moral architecture that allows love to flourish without fear. Coercion creates silence, not peace. It brings obedience, but not trust. If God were to eliminate every rebel the moment reverence arose, he would silence all questions, end all conflict, but at what cost? The universe would be ruled by terror, not trust. Creatures would bow not out of reverence, but out of self-preservation, and love, the very reason for their creation, would vanish from the equation. God is not interested in that kind of rule. He is not building an empire of quiet obedience, but a kingdom of living relationship. A kingdom where love is freely given, where good is chosen even when evil is an option, and where the deepest loyalty comes from the heart, not from the threat of destruction. That is why Satan is still allowed to exist, not because God is powerless, but because he is too powerful to stoop to coercion. His rule is secure enough to permit opposition without panic. His truth is strong enough to shine even when lies exist alongside it. And his love is real enough to wait for the free return of those who walk away. In such a kingdom, where love is not demanded but desired, the existence of freedom, even when abused, is not a threat. It is a testimony to the kind of king God truly is. Evil is not an eternal force. It is not equal in power or status to good, and it does not exist as a necessary part of the universe in the same way that light, truth, or love do. Evil is a parasite. It cannot exist on its own. It can only twist, distort, or corrupt something that was once good. There is no pure essence of evil that stands on its own. There is only the ruin of something that was meant for glory. Satan was not created as evil. He was created as an angel of light, full of wisdom and beauty. His rebellion did not create something new, it deformed something pure. That is the nature of all evil. It takes what is good and breaks it. If we accept this, then we must also accept that evil is not something that must be defeated by brute force, as though it were a competing army or a rival god. Evil is something that defeats itself over time. When it is allowed to run its course, when it is revealed in full, it unravels. Its own lies collapse. Its own works bring pain, confusion, and death. And when all of this is laid bare, the truth of goodness shines all the more clearly. The lie becomes its own evidence against itself. This is one of the reasons God allows Satan to continue existing. Not because he condones evil, but because he knows that evil, left exposed, will rot in public view. It will reveal its own emptiness. It will show that it offers nothing lasting, nothing true, nothing joyful. If Satan were destroyed too early, the full measure of his corruption would remain hidden. People would question whether rebellion really was so bad, or whether perhaps he was silenced because he had a valid challenge. But by letting evil speak, letting it act, and then letting it fall by its own weight, God ensures that no one will be able to say in the end that the truth was hidden or suppressed. There is a strange mercy in this. Not mercy towards Satan, but mercy toward the rest of us humans, angels, all free creatures, who must see with our own eyes the path of rebellion before we can truly appreciate the beauty of obedience. Light shines most clearly when it is contrasted with darkness. Goodness becomes most beloved when it is threatened. And love is most powerful when it stands in the midst of betrayal. God's patience with Satan is not tolerance. It is strategy, purpose, and power. Evil is not being ignored, it is being unwound, and that unwinding takes time. It is easy for us to think that God should act more quickly. We see suffering, deception, violence, and we ask, why not destroy the source? But that would be to cut the story short. The problem with evil is not only its existence, but its seduction. People follow it, admire it, imitate it. It promises freedom, pleasure, knowledge, power. And as long as it keeps those promises hidden behind glamour, people will keep falling for them. So God allows evil to show its full fruit. He allows its promises to be tested, its lies to bear consequences. In time, it becomes clear that rebellion leads to ruin, that pride ends in despair, that falsehood cannot last. This does not mean that God is passive. He is always working through history, through conscience, through scripture, through his Spirit, to bring about redemption. But he does not shortcut the process. He lets the wheat and the weeds grow together for a while, so that in the end, the separation is clear and complete. He lets the night fall so that the morning is not just welcomed but celebrated. If Satan were removed too soon, it would rob the universe of that clarity. So God lets evil run until it exhausts itself, until its vanity is exposed, until its cruelty is known, until no one can say, I was deceived, I did not know. In the end, evil will not be simply crushed, it will be humiliated. It will be shown for what it is, and those who followed it will not be able to blame God or question his justice. They will see that they were not victims of force but participants in a lie that collapsed on its own. This is why Satan is not yet destroyed, because evil is not merely something to be opposed with force, but something to be revealed in truth. And when the truth comes fully, evil will have no place left to hide. In every great story there is a villain, not because we admire evil, but because we learn what goodness truly means when it stands in contrast to something else. A hero without a challenge is not a hero at all. A virtue that is never tested remains a theory. The presence of evil in the world is not an accident, nor is it evidence of God's weakness. It plays a role in the unfolding drama of history, a stage upon which the greatness of the good can be revealed, not just in theory but in action. struggle, and sacrifice. God's plan is not simply to remove evil, but to overcome it, to allow light to shine in the presence of darkness, and in doing so to demonstrate a glory that could not be seen otherwise. Satan's continued existence is not a mistake but a thread in the tapestry of a greater story. His rebellion, his lies, his rage, these are not the end of the story but part of the conflict that makes the final resolution all the more glorious. We understand courage because fear exists. We recognize truth because lies have been told. We value humility because pride has caused such ruin. If God were to erase Satan from the very beginning, we would lose a dimension of understanding about who God is and what it means to choose Him freely. For the triumph of God's kingdom is not shown by avoiding the presence of evil, but by defeating it in such a way that none can question the justice, mercy, and wisdom of God. In the great sweep of divine history, every move has meaning. Satan's continued influence, though painful and tragic, serves a purpose. It reveals what happens when created beings turn away from the source of life. It teaches, it warns, and it prepares. Through the experience of evil, the depth of good becomes more real. Through the pain caused by rebellion, the healing offered by grace becomes more precious. And through the darkness, the light is seen not just as beautiful but as necessary. The story God is telling is not one where evil is hastily erased, but one where good proves itself stronger, deeper, and more lasting. Even in our lives we see this truth echoed. We grow not only through blessings but through trials. Our faith deepens when it is challenged. Our love matures when it is tested. God does not want puppets who nod in agreement because they've never seen another way. He wants sons and daughters who have looked into the storm and chosen Him still. And for that choice to be meaningful, the storm must be allowed to rage. The devil tempts, lies, and deceives, but each of those lies is an opportunity for truth to shine brighter. Each temptation is a stage where character is formed, and each battle is a space where God's grace can prove victorious. In this way, the presence of Satan and his influence is not a contradiction to God's plan, but a part of it. Not because God delights in evil, but because He permits it to exist for the sake of a greater good that we cannot fully see yet. The cross itself, the very symbol of divine love, only came about through betrayal, injustice, and violence. And yet, from that place of horror came redemption for the whole world. What Satan intended for evil, God turned into salvation. That is the pattern. That is how the story is being written. And the end is already known. Evil does not win. Satan does not rule. His time is limited. His power is borrowed and fading. But his presence still serves a purpose until the final chapter is written. God is not in a hurry, because He is not uncertain. He is revealing His glory in time, allowing every thread of the story to reach its proper end. When the curtain finally falls and the stage is cleared, no one will be able to say that good triumphed by chance or by shortcut. They will see that it triumphed in full view of evil, under pressure, in suffering, and with patience. And that, more than any easy victory, will declare the greatness of the one who wrote the story. So then we are not left in confusion, nor is God left in conflict. The continued existence of Satan and the fallen angels is not a sign of divine weakness or neglect. It is a deliberate part of a greater story being told, a story in which freedom is real, justice is deep, love is chosen, truth is revealed, and glory is earned through patience, not force. God does not destroy evil the moment it appears because He is doing something far greater. He is allowing the universe to see, feel, and understand the full contrast between rebellion and righteousness. He is not merely silencing evil, He is defeating it in such a way that its defeat will never be questioned again. And when the end comes, when every knee bows and every tongue confesses the truth, it will not be out of fear, but out of the undeniable weight of truth and the beauty of a God who let the storm rage, only to still it with a word.